Hi, everybody. Today's May 2nd, 2024, and I have with me Professor Dr. Nathan Cofnas out of Cambridge, I believe, University, England. Nathan, what's been up with you lately? Why are you in the news?
Well, I can't comment specifically on all aspects of the news, but there's some, speaking abstractly, there's some controversy concerning my views on race and the implications of hereditarianism about race differences.
Okay. You're at Cambridge. Are you teaching now?
Now, at this time, I'm not teaching. I have a research position at Cambridge. So,
and you're the Leverhulme Professor of Philosophy?
Leverhulme Early Career Fellow. They have funny pronunciations in the UK. So.
Fair enough. Or they might think we have funny pronunciations.
No, they know it's funny, but they stick to it anyway.
And who is that Leverhulme?
I believe he was a soap magnate, and he founded a charity which now funds academic research in the UK called the Leverhulme Trust.
Now, can you kind of give the broad strokes of the controversy at Cambridge over your position and or that professorship?
So it's a 3-year fellowship. I started a year and a half ago. So it's to work on a specific project, which is on the evolution of morality, not related to anything, any of the political controversies that you referred to. So that's what I'm here to do. Then on the side, I write some papers on other topics. I write on Substack, Nathan Cofnas's newsletter, which, but those are not related to the work that I'm employed to do. The main thing that I'm doing at Cambridge.
Okay, I looked you up on Google Scholar. I can maybe put it up for people. Can you tell us some of your work over, what's been your academic work over the last 4 or 5 years?
So my background is in the philosophy of biology and ethics. So I'm interested in the relevance of evolutionary theory for different areas of science and philosophy. In science, I'm interested in how evolution explains morality, nutrition, how it can shed light on nutrition science, and in philosophy, I'm interested in the implications of the fact that morality is the product of evolution. What does that mean for the nature of morality and moral obligation? So I've been writing about a range of topics connected with these issues for the last several years. I graduated from Oxford in 2021. Then I came here to Cambridge.
So tell us what have you discovered? What's your basic thesis, or what you propound or propose along those lines? I mean, you're saying this is kind of morality comes up. Is it within groups or within the species as a whole? Are we unique in having a moral code? Are there other animals that have one? Are we able to discern it? How do we discern our own?
So morality is the alleged fact that you ought to do something or you ought not to do something. So what is the nature of this oughtness? Is it an objective feature of the world? Like, let's say 2 + 2 = 4. There was, in fact, some controversy about whether 2 + 2 = 4 on Twitter a couple of years ago. I don't know if you follow that. There was some people were insisting that it can actually equal 5. But leaving that aside, most people would agree that 2 + 2 = 4. Now, why does it equal 4? It's just a fact about logic. It's the nature of logic that the way these concepts relate to each other If you add 2, then you get 4. Now, is morality the same thing? Is there a if I borrow $100 and the time comes to pay the $100 back, and I have the money and there's no special circumstances, is it a truth of the logic of behavior that I ought to return the $100 in the same way as 2 + 2 = 4? Or you could say maybe in some way it's an empirical truth, like the sun is whatever it is, 93 million miles away from Earth, on average. So that's also true, maybe in a different way from 2 + 2 = 4. It's a contingent fact about the world. So could morality be true in that way? Or is morality just a figment of our imagination, just a biological function that serves some adaptive purpose to make judgments about what I think you ought to do, what I think you ought not to do? But there's no independent reality. It's just our feelings and our conventions. And if we decided we no longer care about morality, then the whole thing would just disappear in a puff of smoke. Now, well, how would you decide among these various options? You might argue the fact that we have moral intuitions gives us some prima facie justification for believing that we have that moral obligation is real. So I have an intuition that it's wrong to shoot random people for fun. So when I think about that, shooting random people for fun, how do I evaluate that? I think, well, it's wrong. I experience the wrongness of that action. So you could say just the fact that I have that experience gives me some justification for believing that it really is as I perceive it to be. Now, okay, so let's say that's true, but how would I counter that argument? Well, what if I can show that I can give a causal story that explains why you have that emotional response when you think about shooting random people for fun. And the causal story that I tell has nothing to do with morality, with an independently existing morality. So let's say, even if there were such a thing as moral truth, if the causes that are responsible for your moral belief don't track that truth, then that would undermine my justification for holding those beliefs. So to make it clear, I can illustrate with an example. So you said, did you stop by the restaurant? Said, yeah. Well, how many people were at the restaurant? Well, 30 people were at the restaurant. And I say, well, how did you determine that there were 30 people at the restaurant? When you stopped by, did you look in the restaurant and did you count? No. Did you ask somebody who was in a position to tell you the number? No, I didn't do that. Well, what did you do? Well, I had a bucket with 100 balls on it and labeled 1 to 100. And I selected one randomly and it came up 30. And then based on that, I formed the belief that there are 30 people in the restaurant. We say, well, maybe that is how you form beliefs because you're confused about something. But what ball you randomly select from the bucket has nothing to do with how many people are actually in the restaurant. So the way that you formed your belief was wrong. It doesn't track the truth about the relevant facts. So in the same way, so that would be a debunking argument. So you're saying my belief was formed in the wrong way. It doesn't correspond to an independently existing reality. Therefore, we should reject it. So we do the same kind of thing for morality. I show that your intuitions about morality are the product of, say, natural selection or certain sociological forces, none of which have anything to do with morality. Evolution just selects for inclusive fitness. So, the big fish eats the little fish, eats the smaller fish. It doesn't care about justice or what you ought to do. It just selects for whatever causes your genes to spread. So if your moral intuitions are also caused by natural selection, which is only concerned about spreading your genes, there's no reason to think that those intuitions represent the truth or mind-independent truth. And so my view is that when we do give a scientifically accurate account of where our moral beliefs come from, those explanations are debunking for our moral beliefs. They show there's no reason for us to take morality seriously as being objectively true.
So there's a lot to digest there. Do you notice morality or the ramifications thereof, or what do you want to call it? I mean, there's something that happens societally. I have this little thing stuck in my head, so I'm going to pop it out. I saw this quick little reel video a couple of years ago, and there's 4 toads or little frogs, and they're sitting waiting, and research or whatever puts like a, I don't know, worm or fly in front of them, and they're all kind of looking at each other. I mean, maybe they do that anyway, but they're all just kind of hesitant, waiting, and there's only one worm or something like that, and then one of them toads, reaches out and grabs it, eats it, and the other 3 attack him. For taking the thing that they all wanted, I guess. They've got brains, tinier than kind of like a zit on your forehead or something like that, and yet they have a code. They have a code of action. Was it right for the first frog to eat it? Was it right for the other ones to get angry at him? What was that? What's that all about? Why do they seem concerned with fairness? And I it's not really a huge epiphany, but I think that kind of this concept of fairness might be hardwired into, every mammal, say, and maybe every other animal as well. And is morality kind of an expression of this fairness? And I'm going to give you one other example, because I was thinking of it while you were talking about, rampant, kind of killing people for fun. There's an audio and a video attached of a guy with a GoPro camera from Hamas, and he's veering through the I don't know, one of the kibbutz, and he's talking to his mom. I just killed Jews. I killed them with my own bare hands. I killed 10 of them. I got this one. I slaughtered that one. I killed the mother. I killed her baby. Blah 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 blah. And he's ecstatic. And now we have people at your alma mater and mine. Yours is Columbia, mine's Yale. Demonstrating on behalf of that motion, which broke a ceasefire of long, reasonably long standing. And is he right? Was he okay to do that? Is there morality there? Is it only self-referential from the group you happen to be in, whether there's one group of toads or another, or people?
So to answer the second point first, so if you would ask that Hamas terrorist why he's killing people, he wouldn't say it's for fun. He's not killing people for fun. He would.
But he was ecstatic. He was ecstatic.
So he was having fun, but that wasn't the reason. So he was doing it for the sake of the war against the people that they regard as their their enemies, their oppressors, the enemies of their religion, and so on. So he has fun while he's doing it, but that's not, he wouldn't say, I'm doing it in order to have fun. Now, now there are people who have deviant, in the sense of statistically unusual moral intuitions. So there might be somebody who says, yeah, well, I kill people for fun and I see nothing wrong with that. So I'm speaking in general. People who believe in moral realism, though, there would be a near consensus on the idea that it's wrong to kill random people for fun. I think I did say the qualification random, so kill random people for fun. So of course, I mean, he's not killing random people; he's killing the Jews, Israelis, whatever. But so the fact that somebody could have deviant moral intuitions, whether this is a case of that or not, would support my view, because it's just, there's no truth of the matter. It's just based on people's biological constitution and their socialization. They have different moral intuitions. So why should we put any stock in our moral intuitions? It's the product of our nature and our socialization. Regarding the frog video, which I've also seen, which is very funny, but I think it's easy to anthropomorphize animals when they, we kind of assume that they're reacting for the reasons, when they do something that looks similar somehow to how we might react, we impose a story based on our own psychology onto the animals. So it looks like the frog that got the insect first. It looks like he's blamed by the others when they kind of look at him after he's eaten it, and so we think, well, maybe these are an expression of moral intuitions about justice. But there's no evidence that any non-human animal has any sense of justice under carefully designed experiments. You get them, they respond to a stimulus. So the bug was there, the bug was gone, so it just kind of looks around. Frogs don't divide things, they don't cooperate, they don't share 50-50. They follow very simple instincts that are largely understood by those who study these things, and there's no basis even in close relatives for attributing a moral sense to them. And there's a very famous video of, I believe, capuchin monkeys, where the researchers are exchanging food for tokens. So they give the monkey a token, it gives the token to the researcher, and the researcher gives it some food. So the reward. There's a very well-known video, I think it was Franz de Waal's experiment, where they have two monkeys side by side, and one monkey gives his token, and they give him a grape. In exchange for the token, they give the first monkey a grape, which the monkey likes a lot because it's sweet. It's like candy for them. Then they do it to the second monkey, and they give him a cucumber. Now, a cucumber is better than nothing, but compared to a grape, and it's not good at all. So the second monkey hurls the cucumber in the researcher's face and starts pounding at the bars of the cage and screaming. And so the interpretation was that normally the monkey would be satisfied with the cucumber, but I saw the other monkey get a grape, and so now it's not fair. So because I think it's not fair, I'm going to throw a fit. That was the interpretation. But what people leave out is that if there's no first monkey at all, and there's just a plate of grapes within view of the monkey, it has exactly the same reaction. It's not that the other monkey got a grape and I only got a cucumber. It's that I see grapes and you're giving me the inferior cucumber. So all of these alleged demonstrations of moral intuitions in non-human animals end up being deflated in this way. And there's no real, among animals, they cooperate when they follow their instincts, like, bees and ants and wolves cooperate in some sense, but there's no evidence that any animals achieve a shared goal by coordinating and playing different parts in a plan to achieve the goal, so that I am aware that I'm playing role A and you're playing role B, and then we can switch the roles and then change our behavior in such a way as to advance the collective goal. Non-human animals don't do that. There isn't any example of that.
It's why we see so few, major apes in the NFL.
Right. Theoretically, they would be very good in the NFL if only they had just a human brain.
Yeah, no, physically, I mean, I think, certain athletes, these things get all, barely you can use terms like this, but, the major apes have a physique that is enviable, to do certain types of goals. I mean, I've got, who knows how far they could throw it if they could be trained. I mean, their arms, an orangutan is really, I think they have long arms for their torso. And I think, certain sports that's kind of a measurement. In the NBA, they're always talking about, their wingspan and so forth. So theoretically, but again, they don't have the human brain. They don't, they're not trainable to that. But I'm on the other hand, nobody's done the experiment, I imagine. I'm not.
I think humans actually do have a special advantage when it comes to throwing. So we've been specifically selected. I'm not an expert in the physiology, but I believe that might be like a specialty of humans. But in terms of just grabbing somebody and, throwing him down, yeah, obviously a chimp or a gorilla is unstoppable compared to a human, especially. But you can't teach them to be on a team and to wait until I actually don't know the rules of football, but they can't wait until the guy throws the football and it's time to charge forward. They can't understand any of that.
You didn't play football.
I actually briefly did, but I quit before I ended up playing a game. So I did train, but I never learned the rules.
All right. Well, there's still time. There's still time to at least become a fan, I guess. But then you got your other football over in England, so you have a choice.
I don't know. I'll stick to philosophy.
Fair enough. Philosophy over football. Yeah, that could be your next book. So, do you have a book out, by the way? And if you don't, what would be your next book or your first?
Well, I do have I'm working on a book as part of my my project at Cambridge. So it will be on the nature of morality and the rise of liberalism, the reasons for cross-cultural convergence on liberalism, and the likely how that is likely to develop in the future.
Okay, so liberalism has meant different things at different times. I mean, there's kind of a bumper sticker or thought that's like, I was a JFK liberal, therefore I vote for, Ronald Reagan or, Trump or Bush, where, the Liberal Party, the liberalism, we don't have a Liberal Party per se, has left us. And what is it liberal? I mean, I think the original root term is in liberation or liberty. And liberal arts, has the same term, but that was kind of, I guess, a term based on the Roman ideal of a free citizen needing to know certain things. The trivium, which is no longer, it was the opposite of being trivial at the time. So definitionally, what does that mean, liberal, for you?
Well, in the classical liberal tradition, it meant something very different from what it's come to mean. So I refer to left liberalism, which is I'm rooted in certain liberal values, which have been distorted in a certain way. So originally, liberalism was supposed to be basically leaving people alone as long as they're not hurting anybody. So that meant free markets, or liberals advocated for free markets and individual freedom. Now, left liberalism seeks to achieve, some of the original goals of liberals, but by more coercive means, or through interventions which would not have been accepted by somebody like John Stuart Mill. So now the left liberals, which probably shouldn't be called,
right?
It may not be really correct to call them liberals at all, but they now are moving towards censorship, intensive intervention, bordering on socialism, intervention in the economy. But basic liberal values, like freedom of sexual freedom, freedom of speech, although now this has more and more limits, have been widely accepted across many societies. Liberal values like opposition to war, opposition to torture. The world has generally been liberalizing on these issues. Women's rights, extending the vote to larger and larger classes of people. Obviously, slavery has been rejected by virtually everybody, at least officially. So there are a few holdouts, but in general, the world is moving in a leftward direction. And so the question is, what has been driving this, and does it go on forever? Like, as Fukuyama says, is this the end of history, where liberal democracy is just the most stable form of government, which balances various interests and needs for economic growth and freedom, security, and so on. So there's not going to be any serious challenger to the neoliberal world order in the foreseeable future, or are we going to? Is there some vulnerability that isn't widely recognized that threatens to undermine the entire system, or do the trends that have brought us to the current situation somehow push us in some completely unexpected direction in the future? So those are all kind of questions I'm interested in. Now, from the liberals' perspective, one explanation for worldwide convergence on liberalism is quite simple, which is liberalism is just objectively correct. So we all discovered the objectively correct moral theory. So slavery is wrong. That's just objectively true. And men and women are equals is also just true. And so people have recognized these facts. And then once you recognize the truth, then it'll be like, well, once we recognize that the earth is round, the vast majority of people will just accept the fact that the Earth is round. So the explanation for why was there cross-cultural convergence on beliefs regarding the shape of the Earth, the answer is because we discovered the truth, and now that we know it, we're never going to forget it. Now, I don't think that's the case with morality, because there is no truth about morality. And the fact that there is no objective truth about morality means that any moral system could potentially be is not necessarily the end of history in this, because there is no truth, and as conditions change, people's values can change to adapt to the new reality for them, and therefore the future. There are many possibilities open to us in the future.
Right. Now we see a lot of the shifting morality. We see the shifting in the term liberalism. We see what kind of things the left wants. The left used to want free speech, and when they were not in power, it was question authority and don't trust anyone over 30. Now that they're over 30, they don't trust anyone under 30. If they're the wrong political opinion and so forth. And I think the left no longer argues for free speech. They may be against war, but they certainly want one in Ukraine. And this kind of liberalism thing, as far as the end of history, it's this is seems kind of a solipsistic view on Fukuyama's part, and the West, as whatever that is in general, because the East or the Mideast or the Southwest Asian Middle East, so forth, does not necessarily have the same perspective on it. I'm just curious. We haven't really talked about religion per se, and I'll segue into that with I guess it's kind of a moral. It's not really a moral joke. I'm going to stick it anyway. It's a joke. Somebody sets a blind date between a sadist and a masochist, and figures these two will get along great. Sadist likes to inflict pain, and the masochist likes to absorb pain, and so they go on. Anyway, they go out to dinner. Blah blah blah. Anyway, they get back to somebody's house. And, the masochist is all ready, and it's like, hurt me, hurt me, hurt me. And the sadist says, no. So the way of hurting that person is the opposite of what you might think the sadist do. So, even the sadist kind of moral situation or his imperatives change based on the audience and the situation. But getting back to sadism and the Marquis de Sade, and I'm kind of channeling Andrew Clavin here. He says without God, the sadist is equally correct in pursuing his own pleasure at the potential pain of somebody else, if there's no kind of like if there's not a different sensibility, and religion seems to be playing a huge role in the setup of all of these moralities, or maybe it's just demographics. And I think Joe Biden's running for re-election. He may care more about Dearborn, Michigan, than he does the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And over time, the Jewish population. I think you've written on this, and we'll maybe show some of it. You're talking about the death of liberal Judaism, and some of it's demographic, and some of it's a reckoning of who is what, and the left is kind of being taken over by forces that are totally different. If the left, say in the United States, 20th century, was kind of a liberal, New York City kind of intellectual center, a lot of Jewish thought there, New School and all this kind of stuff, Frankfurt School. Anyway, all these things kind of like influenced, they say, the Democrat Party thought and what was liberalism, and that's all different now. If the left and the Democratic Party, is more going to listen to, say, more young Muslim voices, which have a totally, say, different view of even that concept of lending $100 and giving it back, which I thought, frankly, should have interest on it. There's a lot of different structure and systems that are going to be applied once your demographics change. So I don't know if you can intuit a question there, but I guess the original one would be: is there a God? Do we come back to that? Is Nietzsche right, or is Nietzsche dead?
So now, whether there's a God or not, I don't know. I don't rule out the possibility of there being an agency beyond what we experience and what science is able to detect. Now, is there a God as described by any of the religions that we're familiar with? And to that, I think there's no evidence for such a God. No evidence that there's a God that cares about morality, or if it does, that it's communicated its views about morality to us. Now, if there were a God who cared about our behavior, and there's no evidence that there is, but if there were, we have no basis for knowing what that God would want of us, unless it sends us a message. Maybe the God wants as much war as possible, and it's he favors chaos, or drinking as much coffee as possible. It could be anything. We have no way to know. Now, if there is such a God, well, why should we even? Let's say there were a God who had various preferences. Drink as much coffee as possible. Well, why would we even care what that God? It would be an interesting fact about the world that there's a God who cares how much coffee we drink. But now, of course, if the God gave us some prudential reason to care, if he says drink coffee or I'm going to do something bad to you, then we would care. But that wouldn't really be morality. It would just be a powerful being tells us to do something or else. So we listen. So you don't make morality simply the mere fact that a God exists doesn't make morality real in the sense that 2 + 2 = 4 is real. It would just be, okay, there's another being in the universe who has various preferences, and so we may or may not take account of those preferences if we see it as being in our interests. So I think there's a certain intuition that, well, if there's a God, then that rescues morality, and everything is objective, and well, it would be an objective truth that God wants ABC, but that wouldn't make morality real in the way that I think somebody like Andrew Clavin wants it to be real.
Fair enough. I was looking at some of your other work, and you I think you're kind of an across the board debunker. I might be getting that wrong, or you can define what that term means. You were talking about, I saw, I don't know if it was printed or preprint, a paper about vegetarianism, kind of recommended, for kids, and whether that's a healthy choice for them. And you've had other, I mean, I think it's not, but certainly people are doing that. There are ways that people impose their kind of adult wishes on kids these days, and I think there's a certain amount of terms, social contagion, going towards letting 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds determine what sex they are when they may not really have a good concept of it, and beyond. And then we could start with that, but I kind of want to touch on some of the controversy that is brewing at your university, around you, or through you, and your talks about race. And so maybe I'll just preface. I apologize for the long-windedness, but I'll preface as kind of a simpler question: Are men and women equal in their intelligence, or do men and women have the same type of intelligence, or are there differences that are purposeful or not? Whatever. Are men and women equally intelligent?
So they have different. Intelligence isn't purely one-dimensional, and so IQ purports to measure a the G factor, a single the underlying factor of intelligence, which is called general intelligence, which explains differences in scores among individuals, or the pattern of differences in scores among individuals. But somebody can be better at rotating shapes, better at doing analogies, better at manipulating symbols or completing patterns. People have different strengths and weaknesses. Men and women, on average, there's a huge amount of overlap, obviously, between men and women on all these traits. But on average, there are differences in performance on specific intelligence cognitive tests. And when they designed IQ tests, they did their best to throw out the subtests which showed very large sex differences one way or the other. Emil Kierkegaard has a Substack post where he documents this. So if men are better at a certain task significantly, they just say, well, we'll get rid of that. Then if women are better, we'll get rid of that. So we've kind of artificially done our best to equalize intelligence. Whether it really makes sense to compare
Equalize the measurement of intelligence.
the measurement. Whether it makes sense to compare men and women on a single dimension would be debatable. I mean, men have a big advantage when it comes to spatial intelligence, like quite substantial, and that is the biggest intelligence sex difference in intelligence between men and women is the male spatial advantage. There's some argument that the male average may be a few points higher. Up until age 16, they score about the same on conventional IQ tests. Then males have a small advantage on the average. And there's a difference in the variance. So more men are at the very highest level of intelligence, right. More men are at the very lowest.
Yes, but kind of the normal distribution is more splayed for men. And I mean, we use the term normal distribution. It has nothing to do with what's normal between the two of them. And women can tend to be more tightly bound. I think women are more like other women than men are like other men. On average, I think there's a kind of a wider variation of guys and their behaviors and so forth. And we see that, played out in violence and also, ingenuity on both sides. Or not the sides. Anyway, so are there differences? You're kind of controversial these days. Can you talk about some of the controversy, what people find controversial, and how you'd answer them? And I kind of on a meta level, I was watching your Twitter feed interview with LBC or something like that in the UK. Where the interviewer was attacking you for hurting somebody else's feelings. And I don't think he really gave you a chance to answer. So I'm going to give you a chance to answer that if you like, and or talk about other aspects of your controversial nature these days, why you're controversial and whether you'll stop being controversial, and where's your controversy lead?
So speaking abstractly and without commenting on the specific case, so the goal of philosophy from the beginning was to question convention and orthodoxy, received wisdom, to determine if there are, to draw out contradictions, hidden assumptions. And the response to this activity was, again, from the beginning, not always very, very favorable. We know what happened to Socrates and to other philosophers at that time and throughout history. their critique of the orthodoxy of their day, which has always been different. At every time there's an orthodoxy, there's a political correctness. In ancient Athens, it was very different from what it was in the Middle Ages and what it was in Darwin's time, 70 years ago, 50 years ago, even 15 years ago. We had a completely different set of taboos and norms before the Great Awakening, which was like 2012. They're completely different set of sensitivities and what was considered inflammatory. And in the last several years, really since 2012, last 12 years, there's this new orthodoxy has formed in academia with very little tolerance of somebody who asks questions about it, and particularly in such a frank way, and just as perhaps I did. Now, academia also is a system which specifically selects for conformity and timidity. So the people who tend to become university professors have, obviously they're exceptions, but on average, they have a certain personality, somebody who likes doing homework, who likes to follow the rules. And at every stage, troublemakers are their mechanisms to weed out the troublemakers. So it's very somebody who likes to challenge popular views is not likely to make it. And so academia has a certain culture which reflects the kind of people who are selected to participate in it, which tends to be a very sensorial, conformist. Now, this is not, in my view, conducive to doing what a philosopher is supposed to do, which is not to just follow the orthodoxy. It's to think critically about it, and even to point out contradictions of logic or inconsistencies of fact. And well, yes, I've run up against the orthodoxy, and we see what happens.
So what was the they concede clouds for rain now. So there's a cloud there. So let's assume there was a cloud, and then somebody pops some granular salt that seeds the cloud and starts the rain. So what was that actual action that caused your storm?
It's a so specifically my work on hereditarianism, so race differences, and I'm interested in the reality of race differences. Different populations have different distributions of scores on intelligence tests. There's a question of how much of this is due to culture versus genetics, genetic differences between groups. And I believe that a very substantial part of these differences, at least let's say in the American context, would be due to genetic differences. So they are heritable. It's not, there's a limit to how much schools investing more in education or programs to boost self-esteem. There's a limit to how much that is going to correct for these disparities. And when groups are raised under more or less comparable conditions, you'll still get substantial differences in the means, mean IQ.
So let me ask you, I thought about some aspects of this over time. I mean, perhaps unlike you, I'm a fan of American football, and I follow basketball as well, and I notice there's a paucity of pallor. The American population, I'm not sure what the number is right now, but at the time I was growing up, say it's like 11, 12% African American, Black, and that's highly magnified as a percentage in the NFL and or basketball and so forth. Now it wasn't always like that. I mean, back in the 50s, I think both leagues, for various racial, other social reasons, but in the end, basketball is kind of a lot of New York City kids, and that wasn't really the same population. There were a lot of Jews, for instance, in the NBA early on. Red Holtzman and Red Auerbach and so forth from that tradition. Not both of them played, but anyway, it was a different league back then. Now I think there's one Israeli in the NBA entire. So the demographics changed in the cohort of players playing. I don't think massively changed in the population. So this is posited that blacks are better athletically. And why not? Because they had, and people attributed, all the kind of different circumstances of their having, been in Africa and or selection by slavery for certain physical characteristics, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to give one quick anecdote. I apologize. But this is like a decade ago, maybe more. I was at a party and happened to be, I think, a Saturday or Sunday maybe, and it was a football game on. And I happened to be speaking with a law professor I'd never met before. I wasn't aware he was a law professor. And he's kind of like looking at the screen saying how horrible it is that all these football players, and this is before NIL, which is a separate term of art where the players are getting kind of paid now. But they weren't getting paid at the time. And he said, oh my God, I can't believe universities dilute their academics to put all these players in the university and have this masquerade of a football team, blah, blah, blah. And they should not have any special admissions for athletes, or basically said they should have people just get in who can do the work. And if these guys can do the work, fine. But anyway, he's going on like that. I said, well, I see you and I may agree about affirmative action. He said, I didn't say that. I said, well, I thought you just said you want people getting in solely on merit. So you want to like exclude the athleticism, and I assume you want to exclude everything else and just get people who can do the homework, as you mentioned, and do the work and want to study and blah, 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 and bring forth the academic, whatever. And he said, no, I never said, it said it's really important that the schools look like the communities. I said, so Dartmouth should have nobody Black? Is that what you're saying? Because they're in a kind of New Hampshire, white community, and maybe Columbia should be, reflect Harlem or the Upper West Side. I don't know which one. I mean, which community and how are you going to do that? And he got very flummoxed and flustered, and I terminated the conversation. But the question I have is, are there, if we can kind of tacitly acknowledge that there seem to be differences in athletic ability, are there differences in intellectual capacity? And I'm gonna make this question extra long. But I also would kind of push back on it's not genetic per se. I mean, Nigerian Americans in the United States do better than the average of whites economically. I'm not saying that's a literacy test or IQ. Jamaicans do better than American blacks, and pretty much every immigrant population do better than American blacks do across the board, and they are more black, as it were. They're more African than the American, quote unquote African Americans. Are probably about 56% African, as opposed to the Nigerians who are almost axiomatically 100% African. So anyway, amongst the swirl there lies a question. Is it wrong to attribute it to genetic when it seems to be, at least amongst the Black population here, Jamaicans and Nigerians do better, and Haitian, frankly, even do better than American Blacks, that it's kind of a cultural phenomenon?
So hereditarianism doesn't mean that all populations, that there's a special connection between skin color and intelligence. There are populations that are formed in different ways, and they all have different distributions of intelligence, partly for genetic reasons. They're talking about Nigerian immigrants who are a highly selected group. I mean, it was the case, certainly, there was a time when they were accepting immigrants from Haiti, but only if they had like a higher degree. So they were accepting like the doctors and lawyers from Haiti. So they came, and yes, they did better than the average white person. But if you look at the entire population, then you get average differences. If you take a selected group from within the population, then they could be either higher or lower in terms of intelligence than another group. So now, if you look at Nigeria, the country, their outcomes are not better than those of say, white America. When you take the top 10% or whatever it is from Nigeria, then yes, they will be more intelligent than the average white person. Within the white so-called race, you have very different populations. In certain parts of America, say, you have areas that are populated by white people but have very low educational attainment, very low socioeconomic success, and it's very likely that, I mean, there may be some cultural factors involved, but it's probably not all cultural. It's probably, and to the extent that it is cultural, it's the culture. Where did the culture come from? The culture is itself influenced by the genetic potential of the population, the genetic dispositions of the population. So it's not that intelligence is tied to race per se, but on average, there are these differences between population representative groups of different races.
So you were talking about Harvard University. We've seen kind of Claudine Gay there, in a sense, as an affirmative action hire. We're rounding out the hour, and I want to give a chance to people to see your Substack and your Twitter and whatnot. But maybe you can talk, a tiny bit on that, and then kind of close things out for us. What are your views, and where do things stand for you going forward in the realm of philosophy? You're going to open a philosophy store yourself, and independent philosophy department, or where does a philosopher go if he's not on a university, say?
So regarding Claudine Gay, I mean, there's obviously a case of affirmative action. Harvard is they have practiced a very extreme level of affirmative action. It was they conducted an internal study in 2013, which found that if admissions were based only on academic qualifications, meaning grades and test scores, that Blacks would make up 0.7% of the undergraduate population. And so the actual percentage is something like 14%, 15%. I think it was strategically a mistake for them to practice such a blatant, put such a blatant affirmative action hire in charge of the university, because there are serious Black scholars who they could have selected, who would have been credible. But they chose Claudine Gay for some reason, and then it turned out that she's a plagiarist, and it kind of blew up in their face. As far as my career goes, and I am committed to reforming mainstream institutions, so I do hope to continue in academia. Of course, there's a certain amount of struggle involved with that, but that's how it is.
Yeah. Well, it could be, the institutions, I mean, it's kind of like government versus private industry. You work for the government, you're going to be constrained by what the government wants. And I'll give you, extreme example. I could become a military doctor or a soldier in general, and I would literally have, an officer in charge of me. And if I thought X, Y, or Z, and X, Y, or Z was not what the military wanted me to say or think or do, I would not be able to do those things. And I don't know if universities are going down that route. On a private basis, if I open my own shingle, I could have that. And with philosophy, again, I was joking about philosophy store, but there might be some philosophy stores out there. Elon Musk may, or Peter Thiel or whatever, they might have a place or a sinecure, so forth, for people thinking otherwise. And obviously there are think tanks and so forth. And you're pretty good at thinking. I'm not sure how good you're going to be doing thinking in a tank. So I've had an interesting time with you today, and I appreciate you're spending it with me. I think if I can retain it, I think I learned a lot, and food for thought. So I want to kind of give people a chance to look at some of your spaces and places, and they can. Oops, sorry about that. And they can. Oops, that's still not working. There we go. I got to add this to the stage. Sorry about that. Incompetence. Here is your Twitter feed. Appropriately enough, it has a picture of you, and on the hallowed ivy halls of Hogwarts or something like that. I can't tell which. You have Substack. Interesting. Let's see. How do I get in here? And you talk about the guide for the hereditarian revolution. And you have some other interesting topics here. Remind me to talk about the rights stupidity problem. I was reading through a number of these. Are smart people superior? It's a lot of food for thought. People find your articles, and I think you also, it's there's the Twilight of the Liberal Jew, and this is in the Critic magazine. I was looking over that. Your debunked views and in response to attempted cancellation. So I think people could perhaps take a look here and kind of get into your thoughts more deeply. And they're frankly fascinating stuff. I enjoyed looking, albeit briefly, at which one is it? Well, actually, a lot of these is science is not always self-correcting. I think we saw that. There's people can find you on Google Scholar and see some of your serious work. And there was a vegetarian article, so I think that there's a lot of, interesting universe of your concepts out here. And so I recommend people check those out. Just as a final note here, if people want to help support my video cast, they can go buy my book. Even better if they read it. It's called Overturning Zika, the Pandemic That Never Was. I'm actually also working on an article right now on the opioid crisis, and it's about 30 pages here. Methadone maintenance ignited America's opioid crisis. So I hope to have that out soon in Brownstone. People can take a look at that. I think people, there's a lot of ideas out there to be debunked. So I appreciate people, who go out there, devil may care if there's a devil, and do their actions and see where the threads may lie. So I have some sympathy with that. Anyway, any last words?
No, thank you very much. It was very good to talk to you.
All right, appreciate that. All right, so thank you very much.